Today we're going to be learning Yoma Daf Lamed Aleph, Chodesh Tov to everybody. The learning this month is the month of Sivan is dedicated by Josh Sussman in honor of both his wife Romi's 50th birthday and his son Zeli. He will Be'ezrat Hashem be making his first solo siyum on Masechet Yoma at his bar mitzvah in July. Romi and I are so proud to be sharing in our learning of Daf Yomi with Zeli and couldn't be prouder of him. And today's Daf is also sponsored by Deborah Asham Weiss in honor of her 39th wedding anniversary to Robert Weiss. Robert, you've enabled me to accomplish so much, 4 amazing children and a rewarding career. Now you've encouraged me to undertake the Daf. May we continue to partner and support each other for many more years. Okay, we're going to start our Daf from the top. We discussed yesterday the issue of going to the mikvah before going into the Azara. We saw 3 opinions. We saw Ben Zoma, who says it's a deoraita law that you have to go to the mikvah before going into the Azara for any reason, maybe only to work, although it wasn't clear. Even if you're not going to work, you have to do it. Then we saw Rabbi Yehuda, who says it's only Rabbanit, so that you remember that maybe I was impure for some reason. The third reason was the reason given by the rabbis who disagreed, the Tanakam who disagreed with Rabbi Yehuda, who said it's only for the Mitzorah, the leper. No one else needs to go into the mikvah before going into the Azara. So our Gemara now asks, Amalei Abaye Rabbi Yosef, Bi'ah b'miktzat shma bi'ah olo, is going into the mikdash a little bit, part of your body, but not most of your body. Is that considered going in? What if I put my hand in? Is that a problem if I didn't go to the mikvah? Amarle b'honot yochichu shehem bi'ah b'miktzat. If you remember, the leper puts in his ear, his right finger, and his right toe. So that will prove that that's only a little bit. And yet what do we learn? The Mitzorah has to go to the mikvah before he does that. So it must be that going in a little bit requires mikvah. Vitanya, and as it says in the Braita, Mitzorah tovel va'omeh b'shar Nikanor. First he dunks in the mikvah, and then he goes to Shar Nikanor, which is the entrance to the Azara, and that's where they do the whole process of his finger, toe, and ear. Now they ask the following question. Classic Gemara question. What if you take a really long knife and you just put the knife in and use it and slaughter the animal? So, and you don't go in at all. Tibai leben zilma, right? Hard to imagine you could do a slaughter like that, but let's assume. Tibai leben zilma, tibai Rabbanan depliga le Rabbi Yehuda. So this question is asked both according to Ben Zoma and according to the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Yehuda. Tibai leben zoma, you can ask, ad kan lo machayev ben zoma ele legavan. You could say that maybe Ben Zoma only required it inside, that if you're really going in. Aval lebarai lo, but not if you're standing outside. Odilma atilim shuchet, or maybe you'll get by accident, maybe you'll move inside. You're trying to slaughter, it's not working out. You'll quickly, you'll move inside. You'll forget that you hadn't gone to the mikveh, and it'll be a problem. So they now say that. So that's the question. Are we worried or not? That's the question according to Ben Zoma. And Tibai Rabbanan depliga le Rabbi Yehuda, and we can ask the same question according to the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Yehuda. Ad kan lo ka'amrei Rabbanan hatam de lo ka'avid avoda, aval hacha de ka'avid avoda lo odilma lo shna. So they ask, when they said that you don't need to go to the mikvah, maybe that was in a case where you weren't planning to do any ritual. But if you are planning to do a ritual like slaughtering, maybe they would say for that you need a mikvah. So that's not clear. Or maybe lo shna, or maybe it doesn't make a difference. No matter what, they don't think you need to go to the mikvah. And the answer the Gemara brings is teku. We don't really know. The question stands. The Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur goes to the mikvah 5 times and washes his hands and feet 10 times. Now we're going to see that each time he goes to the mikvah, every time he changes clothes. Remember, he wears the Kohen Gadol clothes for when he does the normal avoda, the things you do every day, and he wears the regular Kohen's clothes when he does specific, right, or almost, right, there was a debate about whether it's exactly the same or not exactly the same, but whether the belt is different, but for the most part, it looks more, we call it the big day bad, the linen clothing that the Kohen wears, very similar to what the normal Kohen wears on a regular day. He wears that when he does the specific Yom Kippur activities. So whenever he changes his clothes, he goes to the mikveh and he has to wash his hands and his legs, both before and after, or we're going to see exactly how it works, before and after getting dressed. We're going to see exactly at what points and why. So now they're going to say, Tanu Rabbanan. So the Braita states a little more in detail. So 5 dippings, 10 washings of hands and feet. This is what he does in Yom Kippur on that day. Remember the Beta Parva? It's that one of those 3 chambers that are right next to each other, right on the entrance into the Azara from the east side, which is the entrance, on the south side. Okay, so you walk into the Azara and you make a left, and that's where it is. So now, he would do it there. It's all in, that's in the Kodesh. They're literally in the Azara, that building, and it's on the roof of the building. Okay, there's actually pictures today. You can look at them. I'm not going to show them on the screen, but you can see them on your own. The first one was done, the first dipping of the day was done outside. Where outside? Not so far from here. By the Sha'ar Hamayim. Okay, we're going to see that now. Ubitzad Lishkato Aitab. It's right next to Lishkat Beit Avtinas, if you remember. It was above the gate, the water gate, which is the first gate from the east side on the south side. And it was the first southern gate on the east side of the Azara. But because the mikveh was on top of the Azara, of the gate, it wasn't considered inside the Azara. It was still outside. So it was still in the chol, and that makes sense because he couldn't go into the Azara until he goes to the mikveh. So Amar Abaye, Shma Minay, you can learn from here, Ein etam gavoa mikarka Azara 23 amot. Ein etam, which Rashi explains, was a stream that streamed into the mikveh. Okay, Rashi says, from Mimena ba matamayim lebeit tefillah, it's the dibor matchil ein etam. Mimenu ba matamayim lebeit tefillat sha'ar hamayim she'al hachoma. It basically would go drip, stream down into this mikvah. Ulefi inyana mikhaot, Rashi says, based on the Torah psukim, it seems like it was ma'ayan me naftoach. Okay, that's mentioned in Sefer Yoshua. They think that that's the ma'ayan that is called ein etam. And it must have been 23 cubits higher than the floor of the Azara. How do we get to this? Very simple. All the entryways were height of 20, width of 10. The width of 10 isn't relevant. The height of 20 is relevant, 20 cubits high, which means the mikveh was above this, as we said. So if it's above this, it's at least 20 amot high. Now, how do we get to 23? Well, they say, and chutz mishel ulam, only the ulam wasn't 20 by 10. It had a different measurements. We're not going to get into that now. Vitanya and the Braita says, when it talks about going to the mikveh in general, now we want to get to what's the size of the mikveh. And that will help us know how deep the mikveh is, how high the water level needed to be to stream into there. So it says you're supposed to wash your body in water. So water, may mikveh. That's the kind of water that you need. Kol b'saro, what does it mean by kol b'saro? All of his body. Kol b'saro means, what do we learn from there? Mayim shekol gufo ole bahem. It's water that his whole body can fit into. B'kamahen, what's the size of this? Ama lama berum shalosh amot. We've seen this measurement before. It's 1 ama by 1 ama wide and long, a square, or cube, you could say, height of 3 cubits. So now you get to 23. 20 was the height of the sha'ar, of the gate. 3 above that was the depth of the mikvah. Perfect. The shi'aru chachamim, and this is just a continuation of that braita, may mikvah 40 se'ah. Mikvah waters are 40 se'ah. Okay, that's the measurement, the volume. To which the Gemara asks, but wait, what about the ceiling of the gate? And what about above that? You had to put some plaster and something to keep the water from dripping through, right? You need to insulate it somehow and have the water not go through and be absorbed. They say no, these could be very thin. The wall there, the ceiling of the gate, because it was made of marble, and marble didn't need much thickness. It was pretty solid as it is. So the Gemara says, still it would count as something. It still takes up a little bit of space. So why don't you count that and say it was 23 amot and a mashahu? To which they say, about 23. They didn't have to get, right? If it was closer to another whole cubit, they would have mentioned it. But since it was just a little bit, they didn't need to mention it. Pursue sadin shel boots. So now they're holding in front of the mikveh. We saw in the Mishnah, they hold this linen sheet over the entrance to the mikveh. Why? Ma'ishna shel boots. Why specifically linen? Okay, we talked about before that it was probably for tzniut reasons, to block people's view of the Kohen going in the mikveh. The question is why they use linen. So now they bring an answer that Rav Kahana brings to the next Mishnah. Actually, I don't know if it's the next, probably is the next Mishnah. Yeah, it looks like it's the next Mishnah, which comes up on Lamed Daled, which continues in the process of what the Kohen Gadol did. We haven't even gotten to this coming Mishnah, the one on our daf. So it's the one after that. And it's already discussing the second dipping in the mikveh. So it says, why did they do it there? And why did they put a sadin of boots? It was to remind, so the people knew that, or really the Kohen remembered, that he's supposed to wear linen clothing and not the regular Kohen Gadol clothing. So Hachanami will say the same thing here. So that's why they didn't bend. Also here, seemingly to remind him that he's supposed to wear different clothes today. And they're specifically linen clothes, and that will remind him. To which Tosfot asks a good question. I'll leave you with the question. I'm not going to show you his answer now, but I'll leave you with his question, which is, he says, why didn't Rav Kahana say that here? Why did he say it on the next Mishnah? You should have mentioned it the first time it was mentioned. The Mishnah now continues and says, Pashat Yarad B'Tavan. So the Kohen takes off his regular clothing. Okay, these are normal clothing. He's not wearing Kohen Gadol clothing, right? He might even be wearing pajamas for all we know, right? He just woke up, right? He gets ready for the day. He did the, right? He basically takes off his regular clothes that he's wearing. Yarad v'taval, he goes into the mikvah, okay, he goes down into the mikvah. Alav nistapeg, he comes out, he dries off. Ve'viu lo bigdei zahav lavash. So they bring him now the gold clothes, and he puts them on. V'kidesh yadav v'raglav. Now I want you to notice, only one kiddush yadayim v'raglayim here, only one washing, even though, if we remember, there's 5 tefillot, 10 kiddushim, that seems simple math. Each mikvah dipping had kiddush yadayim v'raglayim, 2 of them with him. So it's a little bit strange it only has 1, and we're going to get to that question at the end of today's daf. But right now we're going to see, after he gets dressed, he then washes his hands. So they bring him the korban tamid. We saw this Mishnah quoted earlier. Kratzo, he starts to slaughter it, but he can't continue slaughtering it because otherwise he won't be able to accept the blood. And he has to do both the shechita and accepting the blood. So he just puts a nick in the neck a little bit. We'll talk about this when we get to it later in the Gemara, not today. Someone else finishes up the slaughtering. Kibel tadami, accepts the blood into a vessel. That's one of these sanctified vessels in the temple. And is rako, and he sprinkles the blood on the altar. Then he goes, right? He's going along the daily activities. He goes to bring the incense that goes with the morning offering, and to clean out the candles, right? The menorah from last night's burning. And then he goes to sacrifice the head and the body parts. And he does them in chaf chavitin, that special mincha that the Kohen Gadol does twice a day, every day. He brings the morning one, the et hayayin, and then he finishes with the wine libations. Those are the libations that go with the daily sacrifice. The morning, now they're just telling you in general. In the morning, where was the incense done? When was it done? It was done between the sprinkling of the blood and the offering burning of the parts on the altar. But in the afternoon, they would do it after they burnt the evarim, before they did the nisachim, the libations. So they did it at a later stage in the afternoon. The incense was offered later. We'll see in the Gemara later, not today, why we do it like that. This really should have been in the beginning when they talked about the mikveh. If the Kohen Gadol was elderly or was very particular and couldn't go in cold water, what would they do? They would heat up water before Shabbat. Some people say even they would heat up coals before Shabbat. And matilin letochatzonen, and they would put it in the cold water, kidei shetafid sinatan, in order to get out the chill from the water. Gemara starts off. Amaru Rabbanan k'mei Rav Papa. So the rabbis now come before Rav Papa and they say, Rabbi Meir. This is obviously, our mission is not like Rabbi Meir. Why? Rabbi Meir, kevan de amar tzrei kiddusha alavisha aved lehu, hachinami le'aved tzrei kiddusha alavisha. Because Rabbi Meir held that the 2 washings are all connected to the getting dressed. Now, the reason why this is different from all the others is because I told you he was wearing different clothes. He was wearing regular clothes. So if you say that the 2 times you have to wash your hands, one has to do with taking off the holy clothes and the other has to do with putting on the holy clothes, then you're going to not have 2 in our situation because he's only taking off unsanctified clothes. He doesn't need the kiddush yadayim v'raglayim for that because they're not sanctified. If you say what they're claiming is that Rabbi Meir holds that both of the sanctifications have to do with the getting dressed. Here you have, he's dressing in holy clothing, and therefore he should have one before and one after. So why doesn't he? Must be our Mishnah doesn't hold like Rabbi Meir. So Amarlu Rav Papa, no, you misunderstood Rabbi Meir. Bein l'Rabbanan, bein l'Rabbi Meir, both agree the chada pshita de bigdei kodesh, v'chada levisha. They both agree that one is on taking off and one is on putting them on. And hacha b'haka miflim. This is the root of their machloka. Now, before we see the root of their machloka, we really have to see where they have this argument. So if you look at Lamed Dalet Amud Bet, you're going to see that in Lamed Dalet Amud Bet, as I said, they're talking about the second dipping that he does. And then it says, they bring him to the Beit Parva, they put the sadin, the sadin boots, that's what we said before, where Rav Kahana said the reason why they did it was to remind him which clothes he's wearing. Now, what does he take off? He takes off his holy clothing. Now notice, first he washes his hands, then he takes off the clothes. That's Tanakama. Clearly, the washing hands has to do with the taking off of the clothes. But Rabbi Meir Omer, Pashat Kidesh Hadav Raglav. He says, first you take off the clothes, then you wash your hands, then you go to the mikveh, then they bring him the new clothes, and then he gets dressed. So the rabbis who said this to Rav Papa understood that since he does it after they take off the clothes, it must be that the washing has to do with the dressing that's coming up. And it doesn't have to do with taking off the clothes. But Rav Papa said, no, just because you do it after taking off the clothes and before getting dressed doesn't mean it's connected to getting dressed. It's really connected to taking off the clothes. It's just the disagreement is, do you do it before you take off the clothes or do you do it after you take off the clothes? But clearly it has to do with, according to Rav Papa, taking off the clothes, in which case, right, if it has to do with taking off the clothes, our Mishnah could work out with Rabbi Meir because our Mishnah says one time. Why one time? Because according to our Mishnah, you only need one kiddush yadayim v'raglayim, because if it has to do with taking off the clothes are not sanctified clothing, and therefore you don't need the kiddush yadayim v'raglayim. So let's see what Rav Papa thinks the machloket is about. Upashat v'rachatz v'lavash. So the pasuk tells us that the Kohen Gadol is supposed to take off his clothes, then he goes into the mikveh, and then it says and then he wears his clothes. So the main thing is that there's taking them off, and then there's wearing it. And the Gemara says, Rabbi Meir savar makish pshita levisha. We're going to compare the two. They're going to be the same. What's true for taking off is going to be true for wearing, or the reverse. So now they're going to say ma levisha. He's going to say we learn it from levisha, just like when getting dressed. Lovesh va'achar kach bekadesh. The hands are washed after you put the clothes on. Af pshita, same thing when you're taking them off. Poshet va'achar kach mekadesh. So here you see Rav Papa's opinion about Rabbi Meir. That Rabbi Meir thinks the washing was done before the new, when he put the clothes on, but really had to do with the taking off the clothes. Take off, wash. Put on, wash. And therefore each one connects with a different activity. And then our Mishnah could work out because, again, there's no kiddush yadayim v'raglayim in the beginning here because he took off unsanctified clothes. It's only when you take off holy clothing, right? Either the 4 or the 8 garments. So now, what's Rabbanan's approach? Well, Rabbanan also think that we're going to compare levisha and pshita, taking off and putting on. Rabbanan savre makish pshita levisha. We do make this comparison, but the comparison is a little different. Ma levisha kashu lavush mekadesh, af pshita kashu lavush mekadesh. Just like when you get dressed, you do the kiddush yadayim v'raglayim after, meaning you're fully dressed when you do the kiddush yadayim v'raglayim. Likewise, when you take the clothes off, you have to be fully dressed when you do the kiddush yadayim v'raglayim, and therefore we're going to do it before the pshita. So that's why they have this machloket. What's the order? To which the rabbis respond and say, wait a minute, Amar le Rabbanan le Rav Papa. Sounds logical what you're saying, but no can do. Umi matzit Amar hachi, could you really say that? V'hatanya, doesn't it say in a braita? Pursue sadin shel boots beino lebein ha'am. Pashat yarad v'taval, alav nistapag. So here's the braita. It says they put the sadin, right? Same thing as our Mishnah. He goes down into the mikveh, he gets up, he gets dressed, he washes his hands. Okay, that so far doesn't tell us anything new. Here comes the important line. Rabbi Meir Omer, but Rabbi Meir says, Pashat v'kidesh yadav raglav v'yarad v'taval alav nistapag. Rabbi Meir says he gets undressed, he washes his hands, even though it's big day chol. So they say to him, it's very nice, your theory, but it doesn't make any sense because he seems to say you do the pshitat yadayim v'raglayim, even though it's big day chol, which means it must be that Both Kiddush Yadayim v'Raglayim have to do with getting dressed and not getting undressed. And Rabbi Meir clearly disagrees with our Mishnah because you see that explicitly in this Bright. And that goes with what they were saying in the first place. And then Alavan is Tapag, it just continues and says, then they no longer disagree. He goes in, he dries up. Then he gets dressed and then he washes his hands again. So what's Rav Papa's response to this? Amar Lahu, Itanya, Tanya. Look, if that's what it says, that's what it says. I can't argue with you. It's a Braita. You're right. I guess I was wrong. Okay, it's good showing how people admit their mistakes. So Bishlam ala Rabbi Meir, the one question that's left is, well, Rabbi Meir makes a lot of sense. Each time there's 2 Kiddush Yadayim v'Raglayim. Makes perfect sense. 5 times 2, 10. Ela l'Rabbanan tish'ah. When I'm going to leave you with that question, right? According to the rabbis, there seem to be only 9, and we know there's 10. So how are we going to figure that out? Have to wait for tomorrow. Chodesh Tov to everyone. Have a great day.